I like putting cliffhangers at the end of my videos. Even when you don't know it's coming, there it comes. Their trip to Shibuya was harried and silent. The streets filled with passing umbrellas like the shells of scurrying beetles. Futaba zipped Morgana up in her coat and kept her head lowered to keep as much of the rain off them as possible. What conversations he overheard was furtive and terse. Surgical masks were more prevalent than ever. Many of the younger pedestrians sported masks in bright colors or with merry printed cat faces, and in this grey and gloomy atmosphere, their manufactured gaiety felt somehow obscene. "I don't feel well," Haru said, as they entered Station Square. She spoke in a guilty whisper like someone standing beside a coffin. "Then please go home and get some rest, Haru," said Makoto. "We're already taking a risk. You need to be in top shape." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I felt this way for some time now, but it just keeps getting worse. Have you ever been so worried that it feels like you're cramping up?" "I too am experiencing the sensation," said Yusuke. "I thought it was just hunger pangs." "Oh no, Yusuke, did you skip lunch again?" "I am quite well, thank you for your concern." On sighed. "I really don't have a good feeling about this." They furled their umbrellas and slipped into the metro, all of them now realizing what Haru had meant. That churning, gnawing anxiety. Like butterflies in the stomach, but with venomous wings. If they focused on it too long, they felt their breath shortening and their chests turning tight. In the eyes of the people around them, they saw their own expressions reflected, that grim and foreboding stare. Paranoia Syndrome was still barely a blip on a global scale, but the rumors seemed to have everyone on the brink of a panic. "It's been a week," Ryuji said. "A goddamn week! How did it get so bad so fast?" "The incidents are compounding," Makoto said, "and they just keep getting worse. What happened at Taito yesterday, Focus," said Morgana. "Take a left here." They descended the escalator. When they reached the bottom, Morgana wriggled loose of Futaba's coat and hopped out. His whiskers twitched as he raised his head and scented the air. "This is it, the point of entry, and it doesn't look like anyone else is around." Ryuji smacked his fist into his palm. "Then let's do it. Any objections?" "Too late for them now," Futaba said quietly. "It's not too late," An retorted. "But no, I don't have any. Even if we're out of practice and unarmed, and we have no idea where we're going or what we're doing, Akira is in trouble," Futaba finished. "Yeah, Akira is in trouble." She smiled a little. "I guess Yusuke was right. We really are selfish." "I'm commencing navigation now," said Morgana. "Stay very close to me. This is going to be tricky." Someone play Life Will Change on full blast for this chapter. At least for this section. What followed was difficult to describe. Morgana remained seated, his tail curled around his legs, but he somehow gave the impression of moving without movement, the world itself groaning around him, turning divided, turning faint. They all felt a brief vertigo as the ground seemed to shift under their feet. "Hey, Inari." Futaba's voice was level, but her hands were shaking. "What do you think we'll find besides Akira?" He laid a hand on her shoulder. "Nothing that we cannot handle." "Right." The skin of the world broke loose. Morgana set off and pulled the scenery along with him, reality wavering and tearing apart, like he'd caught its very threads in his claws, and any onlookers, had they remained at a safe distance, would not have noticed anything unusual. In fact, they would have only noticed the phantom thieves turning unnoticeable. Those assembled young men and women skittering away to the corners of their vision until they disappeared completely. They could have been a daydream or a trick of the light, and then they were already gone.
This is the news.
The MILT issued an official statement regarding the accident in Taito City yesterday morning, in which a sightseer bus en route to the Ueno Matsuzakaya department store lost control and drove down the road at speed. The bus struck several vehicles before it left the road, at which point several trees and light posts halted its progress. While no pedestrians were harmed, the occupants of the damaged vehicles were injured, with several in critical condition. The driver of the runaway bus, Yoshio Ikari, age 47, was also pronounced unresponsive at the scene. Occupants of the bus at the time of the accident stated that Mr. Ikari lost consciousness while driving. Several passengers added that he seemed agitated, repeatedly glancing over his shoulder shortly before suffering an apparent seizure. Due to this incident's resemblance to the ever more prevalent Paranoia Syndrome attacks, a ministry spokesman requested that the public remain calm in this time of crisis, and for drivers to immediately pull over to the side of the road if... Click. This next one's going to kill somebody. What's next? Planes falling out of the sky? Paranoia Syndrome my ass. This guy was on drugs. I feel sick every time I step outside. Always is more and 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 more. Someone needs to fucking firebomb the diet or they'll get off their asses. Yeah, I said it, I don't care who's reading this. Where's the fan site? Did it get taken down? Click. Stocks worldwide suffering a precipitous downturn over the past week, with particular concern to retail and tourism markets. Financial analysts have theorized that the recent drop may be at least partly attributable to the Paranoia Syndrome incidents being reported on worldwide. Experts have further stated that, if this correlation is valid, the Japanese tourism and airline industries in particular may suffer further in light of the recent Tokyo bus crash, which was widely rumored to have been caused by the driver succumbing to Paranoia Syndrome. Due to the illness's lack of unique symptoms, this claim has officially been neither confirmed nor denied, though online discourse has reached what several social media analysts have described as a fever pitch since the collapse of Shujin student Tsukiko Minami 1 week ago. The national diet has remained conspicuously silent amidst growing public unrest, and community activists and industry leaders alike are now calling for an open public forum on the mystery sickness that has become virtually impossible to ignore. Click. Even if they did say anything, who in their right mind would believe it? Don't trust anyone. Don't even trust God. Well, that's harsh, don't you think? We should always trust God. I keep saying it's all a hoax. Wake the fuck up. Gonna be riots in the streets at this rate. Feels like there's someone watching over my shoulder right now. What the fuck is causing this? Say it's terrorists or a cult or the government or a virus. Just say something. What do we do if Japan gets quarantined? Would it even work? PS has been spotted in like 30 countries so far. It's completely out of control. God help us when the Americans get involved. Think I'm going to skip school for the next day or 10. What's even the point anymore? I can't sleep. I can't eat. Click. Conflict on the floor of the United Nations, as the United States representatives threaten repercussions if a full criminal investigation of Paranoia Syndrome is not immediately... Click. Spokesperson from the World Health Organization was still hesitant to officially classify Paranoia Syndrome as a pandemic, citing lack of information regarding the sickness's infectiousness and vectors of transmission. The World Health Organization, the WHO, nevertheless emphasized that they will devote all of their resources to investigating and have called for international cooperation in light of click. Several extremist groups claiming responsibility for Paranoia Syndrome on social media have abruptly fallen silent, with some speculating that members of these groups may themselves have fallen victim to click. Hospital capacity. Several administrators sparked controversy after calling for Paranoia Syndrome victims to be relegated to home care, in order to free space and resources for more immediately threatening... Click. Well, that's all over. I thought this whole thing was going to be about news spreads. Still, that hit pretty close to home, didn't it? This shadow had been standing in a glass shop front like a macabre mannequin. A young man in a threadbare suit that was a size too large. It looked like he'd fished it out of a thrift shop, and when Akira confronted him, it turned out that was probably the case, because he was an individual grown mad with miserliness. He hoarded money, blackmailed his family, spent the bare minimum of it on himself and nothing at all on others. Akira had listened to all of this and then struck him down. Akechi hadn't been much help. He'd taken off running as soon as the glass had shattered. Loud noises still make him jump like a cat with its tail caught in a door. Now the shadow knelt before him, whipped and humbled, and Akechi had crept back out of whatever corner he'd stashed himself in. Akira heard his foot tapping as he listened to the shadow's confession.
"It's all falling apart," the shadow sobbed. "My bills, my job. One bad day is enough to ruin anyone for good. The world's changing. The climate is changing. It's all changing too fast. I need money. I need to weather the storm."
"Sounds like money hasn't done you much good in the end," Akira said. "What good is a long life if there's no one to share it with?" Akechi yawned loudly. Sorry. Akira ignored him. "Maybe you should think hard about what you really want out of life," he told the shadow. "Not just what everyone else thinks you should want."
"Will that help?"
"I don't know. But it's clear you can't go on like this." He crouched down so that he and the shadow were eye to eye. "Take care of yourself." The shadow bowed his head and faded, and was gone. Akira was again left with that feeling of inadequacy, that he hadn't quite said the right thing. He really needed the others to play off of in times like this. "You know they don't actually listen to you," said Akechi. "Once they're beaten, they vanish regardless of whether you provide a shoulder to cry on. I just walk away, personally." "I'm not you."
"That much is clear. Interesting inversion of circumstances with that shadow, don't you think?"
"What?"
"The Phantom Thieves dedicated themselves to eradicating corrupt adults who preyed on the young, did they not? Yet here we had a young man who preyed upon the older generation. His family, no less. How truly despicable."
"Young people can be assholes too," Akira said, and gave him a pointed look as he set off down the street. They hadn't been together long, but Akechi was already getting on his nerves. He'd been quiet as I left Yongen-jaya. Akira had gotten him up to speed on as much as he could remember. Shido's defeat, the deaths of Mementos, Yaldabaoth's rise and fall, yabba-dabba-doo, Akira himself turning himself in and taking the stand to put Shido away for good. His vindication and release. Then about 7 or 8 months of normalcy, followed by this looming threat of Paranoia Syndrome, and what he's learned of its true cause from the attendants of the Velvet Room. Laying out the timeline made it clear how pathetically brief the peace they'd won had really been. But on that subject, at least, Akechi had kept his mouth shut. That didn't last. The vulnerability he'd shown in the theater basement quickly went, and was replaced by the layer upon layer of affectation that Akira had come to know and hate. There didn't seem to be any substance to him when he got like this. He vacillated between wheedling praise and spiteful snark at random, and didn't let up no matter what Akira said in response. He knew that Akechi was just prodding him for a reaction, but the worst part was that he was consistent about at least one thing, and that was his mortal terror of the stranger who'd ambushed them in Yongen-jaya. He flinched at every echo, and in his sleep, when he slept, was thrashing and restless. He seemed to be doing everything he could to postpone their confrontation, and that was no good for Akira. He was in a hurry. Imagine a Persona 4 fanfic where Yu Narukami and Toru Adachi are trapped in the TV world and have to fight their way out with Izanagi and Magatsu Izanagi. And they just take opportunities to shit on each other at every step of the way. The investigation team can still get involved, and maybe Dojima. That I haven't really played Persona 4 Arena and Arena Ultimax, but when Josh is older, I might buy him a copy for the PlayStation 3, if he still has it. I mean, he still has it, but if he still wants to play on it, well, he still has it. Sorry, please ignore what I said. I'll probably give him my copy of Persona 5 when he's older. He continued down the dripping streets, Akechi several paces behind.